started with a very interesting EEG. So I'll provide you with a brief clinical history, and as we go along, I want you to compare the two sides, so compare the two hemispheres. Try to identify asymmetries in this EEG, identify the state of the patient, whether this person is awake or asleep, and then try to recognize abnormalities that may correlate with the clinical history. So the story goes that this is a 46-year-old man with altered mental status. He was brought into the hospital a couple days ago, and the family is concerned that there are times that he is totally amnesic of his surroundings. So let's begin here. So I'll scroll through this EEG, and I want you to take a pen and a paper and try to write down your notes. Obviously, at the end of the tutorial, I'll go over and review some of the pertinent findings. So compare the two hemispheres. Try to identify what do you think of these waveforms. What do these represent? Make sure anytime you review the EEG, you do not miss any abnormality on the ECG at the same time. Try to identify what are these waveforms. Are these normal or abnormal? Make sure you make a note of the montage. Are we using a bipolar montage? Are we using a referential montage? I'll stick to the same montage. So when you're reporting an EEG, make sure you keep those things in mind. Compare symmetry between the left parasagittal electrodes and the right parasagittal electrodes. What is the frequency of the waveforms that you see? So these green lines are 1 second apart. Are you able to identify the frequencies between these two lines? Try to determine the heart rate. So what's the heart rate? So you take 10 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then count all the QRS complexes in those 10 seconds, multiply by 60, and you'll get the heart rate of this patient. While looking at the heart rate, make sure that you do not ignore the rhythm, any missed beats, or other abnormalities. What is the dominant frequency in this background? Is there an asymmetry between the left occipital, so P3O1 looking at the left occipital region, and P4O2, the right occipital region? Are you able to see any asymmetry between these two sides? I hope that you're writing your responses. Any asymmetry between P3O1 and P4O2? Compare this side and compare the other side. If this is your first view of this tutorial, make sure you go back to EEG 101 and at least understand what are the basics of reviewing EEGs. So now I'll just fast forward it to the end of the recording. Now, do you see anything over here? What does this represent? Is this an activity that's coming from the brain, or is this an activity coming from some kind of an artifact? So it seems that the technologist stopped the recording over here and then just had a gut feeling and hooked the patient back again. And do you see what caught the technician's eyes over here? So can you compare what you see on the EEG at this time with the EEG tracing at the beginning of the record? Keep comparing the two sides, and that's the end of the EEG. Okay, let's go all the way back. I hope you've written down your notes, and we'll start from the beginning. So I'm going all the way back. So what you see here, first of all, on the very first page, the findings that catch my eye are, number one, there is an asymmetry in the occipital rhythm. you see frequency. So if you count the frequencies here, you see almost 8 hertz in the right occipital head region, so P402, but you don't see the same kind of rhythm on P301. So you can say that this EEG demonstrates an asymmetry between the left and the right hemisphere. Between these two green lines, you see more or less delta and theta frequencies. So these are delta and theta frequencies here. So comparing the left parasagittal with right parasagittal, you see slowing on both sides, but there is an asymmetry in the alpha frequency that's seen on the right occipital and not on the left occipital region. What you see over here is a lot of beta frequency, fast frequencies, more than 13 hertz, that are seen both in the left temporal and right temporal head region. These waveforms are eye blink artifacts, and some of the bigger so you see a lot of those eye blink artifacts in the frontal polar head region. Eye blink artifacts obviously are seen at FP1 and FP2, and you see a drop in the gradient from the anterior electrode to the electrode that's more posterior to it. And these are big eye blinks, so rapid eye blinks. These could be small eye movements or brief eye blinks. So comparing the two sides of the EEG is extremely important. As I mentioned, looking at the ECG at the same time is very important. You can take 10 seconds of the page, count all the QRS complexes and multiply it by 6, and you'll get your heart rate in 1 minute. So there is diffuse generalized slowing on this EEG. Okay, I'll move the cursor. Okay, at this time, we start seeing this rhythmic slow activity that is predominantly on the right hemisphere. Let me just go back a couple pages here. So you see that at this time you don't see that rhythmic activity. Now keep looking at these 4 electrodes, so FP2 to F4 all the way to P4 and O2, and just continue looking at these 4 channels, and you start seeing this rhythmic delta activity that is there. Although it spills on the left hemisphere at the same time, this rhythmicity is quite prominent in the right hemisphere. So this person is having an electrographic seizure at this time. When the technologist tried to examine this patient, he was unable to respond, unable to follow commands. He was able to utter a few words, but had difficulty with comprehension. And this seizure went on until the end of the recording, 9 minutes later. So the bottom line is, with EEGs, try to compare the two hemispheres, try to identify abnormalities that can explain the clinical picture provided to you on the requisition. So in this case, I would say that this patient is most likely having electrographic seizures coming from the right hemisphere that probably also spread to the contralateral, also spread to the other hemisphere, and probably is responsible for his symptoms. So that's it for today, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you very much.